This is a typical morning outside the Bronx courthouse. Hundreds waiting to see a judge for minor offenses like disorderly conduct and loitering. It's a scene that plays out in courthouses every day all over the city. But our investigation has discovered that many of these people shouldn't even be here.
A New York police officer tonight breaking the infamous blue wall of silence and speaking out about something the NYPD has always denied. Cops have quotas for arrests and for tickets. And the officer says the pressure to make quotas means the arrest of innocent people.
Our primary job is not to assess anybody. Our primary job is to get those numbers and come back with them.
Why do it?
They have to meet the quota. 1 arrest, 20 summonses.
Things are not going to get any better. It's going to get a lot worse. And if you think 1 in 20 is breaking your up, guess what you're going to be doing? You're going to do a lot more than what you think.
In another recording, a patrol supervisor appears to step up the pressure to write more and more summonses.
Next week, it could be 25 in one. It could be 35 in one. And guess what? Until you decide you're going to put this job and go couple pieces of her delivery man, this is what you're going to be doing until then. You understand each other?
He's being clear. The only choice that we have is to do it.
You're telling me that they're just stopping people without a reason? Is that what you're saying?
We're stopping kids walking from school. We're stopping kids walking upstairs to their house. We're stopping kids from going to the store. Kids, young adults.
In order to keep your activity.
In order to keep that quota.
Feeling helpless, one young man has decided to document what he sees as a crime-fighting tactic gone too far. To get that message out, he's putting the stop-and-frisk videos that he shoots on YouTube under the name NYCResistance. He has recorded dozens and dozens of stops in just the past year. Here he follows a group of officers for 1 hour as they walk the neighborhood, stopping to question and frisk school students. The stops all appear to be routine, carried out the same each time. Police stop the student or students, question and search them for weapons and drugs. Nothing is found. Cops move on and repeat the process. The NYPD and the mayor have argued that the stop-and-frisk policies have contributed greatly to the city's historically low crime rate. Still, the U.S. Constitution, in its Fourth Amendment, guarantees protection for all of us against unreasonable searches. And the NYPD's own criminal code clearly reads that a police officer may stop a person when he reasonably suspects that person has or is about to commit a crime. More roll call recordings adding another crack in the blue wall of silence. A veteran of the NYPD sitting down for his first on-camera interview since blowing the whistle on a Brooklyn precinct.
I wasn't meeting their undocumented quota, the non-quota quota.
In his first television interview, Officer Adrian Schoolcraft, an 8-year veteran, spoke about how a top-down pressure to make summons quotas corrupted policing in the 81st precinct.
I never set that as effective policing, or as they would call it, proactive. Be proactive. They were just reacting. When they grab bodies off the street, when the inspector refers to them as bodies, how many bodies have I got in the cells?
He says tapes he secretly recorded of his supervisors during roll call back his quota claims.
Well, they can make it real difficult for you. They can ship you somewhere. Just keep the hounds off. A Parker, a 250. You can force somebody walking down the street. You know what? I stopped for that. I did a 250. What's the big deal?
Schoolcraft says day in and day out it was all about the numbers, with little respect for people's rights.
I want 250 to see something. I want a ghost town. I want to be able to echo from one end of the street to the other. You understand? That's what I want in a perfect world. So that's your mission. Guys need college, need activity, there you go. You gotta get your move.
We've tried repeatedly to get the NYPD to respond to our investigations into police quotas and aggressive stop-and-frisk policies. We've been mostly ignored until today.
There'll always be naysayers, there'll always be critics.
NYPD Commissioner Ray Kelly finally responded to our investigation, which raises the possibility the department's aggressive police policies, with its emphasis on quotas, is filling the courts with innocent people. The emphasis by the department on performance goals or quotas, whatever you want to call them, are leading to bogus summonses.
Well, all I can tell you is crime's down to record lows. We've seen a little increase. Last year was the lowest number of murders that we've had in this city since we started to record them.
But are innocent people getting caught in the NYPD's widening crime-fighting net? Court data we've obtained suggests a strong possibility. In 2008, city courts handled 382,000 misdemeanor criminal summonses, such as disorderly conduct and loitering. Out of those, 193,000 were tossed out by the courts. 51% of all summonses dismissed. Andrea Hibbert was charged with disorderly conduct for asking 6 officers why they were questioning her brother, who was parking the car following a funeral. You wrote to the mayor's office and you said, I thought they were here to serve.
Serve and protect, not harass. And that's what we got that night, harassment.
When Miss Hibbert went to court, the judge tossed out her summons. Jose Sanchez got a disorderly conduct charge for standing outside a store. It got tossed out.
They just singling people out for no reason at all.
The Colborn brothers say they and 3 other friends were the victims of quotas, all arrested a few months ago after one of them had fallen while racing each other.
And they just wanted to arrest us. I told them I fell, but none didn't matter to them.
All 5 were accused of engaging in tumultuous and violent conduct that caused public alarm, given a summons for unlawful assembly, and locked up overnight.
We went through the whole process, and we never even see the judge. They let us out the back door.
Keisha Rivera was ticketed for crossing the street with her baby in a stroller.
A cop car did a U-turn, and like 4 cops of them came out the car and stopped me and gave me a summons.
The number of summonses dismissed by the court has exploded in the past 15 years, from just under 37,000 tossed out in 1994 to more than 5 times that in 2008, a 500% increase. Half of all summonses tossed out. What do you think's going on?
It's a lot of complex reasons for that. It has to do with the court's approach to a lot of these summonses. We can only do our job.
Emails we've received from current NYPD officers suggest quota measures play a role. One writes they constantly want you to violate people's rights and make false statements to get the arrest. Another officer writes, commands put out a list every month of those who don't have an arrest, labeling you a 0. Commissioner Kelly is unapologetic.
I am proud of the record of the men and women of the department because I know we're saving lives.
City lawmakers say the frisk will continue, as they have for 2 decades. They add that the tactic is used to protect.
Civil rights leaders, including the Reverend Al Sharpton, took part in the silent march down 5th Avenue from Harlem to Mayor Bloomberg's townhouse on East 79th Street. Now, critics say the NYPD's Stop-and-frisk program amounts to a form of racial profiling, targeting law-abiding blacks and Latinos.
At a rally and march in Harlem Saturday, there were more calls to end the program.
This policy is racist. It concentrates the racial profiling that leads to 2.4 million people in prison, and that it needs to be stopped, and we were stepping up, building resistance to stop it.
A deep love for young brothers and sisters of all colors, but the disproportionate black and brown brothers who are targeted, we want to let them know we care for them.
Over the NYPD's controversial stop-and-frisk program, the demonstrators were arrested last October outside a police precinct in Harlem. All of them are opposed to the police tactic of stop-and-frisk. The NYPD says the tactic is an essential crime-fighting tool. Well, critics argue they reflect racial profiling.
Commissioner Ray Kelly, as the outrage grows over New York City's controversial stop-and-frisk policy. Kelly announced changes to the policy today, detailing them in a letter to City Council Speaker Christine Quinn. The changes include a system to identify officers who've received complaints. Kelly was also grilled on the topic just hours ago at a city council budget hearing.
You would contest those figures.
This is, I think we have
would
to look at all.
Would you contest those figures?
No, please don't. You know, don't ask me questions like that. You know, I can't answer a question like that because it's a much broader issue.
Well, you're saying the reason this is important is because you're taking guns off the street, but your own data is indicating in terms of percentages that when you frisk white individuals in our community, you're getting more guns percentage-wise from those encounters than you are from blacks and Latinos.
As I said in
That's significant.
Governor Patterson, surrounded by supporters and against the wishes of the NYPD and Mayor Bloomberg, signed a controversial bill into law.
Just the warehousing of the personal data of innocent people makes a mockery of our Constitution, and it stops now.
Stop and frisk street stops by the NYPD have exploded under Commissioner Ray Kelly roughly 1,600 times a day, but yielding arrests or summons only 15% of the time. The names, social security numbers, addresses, and other information has been kept on file even when the person has done nothing wrong. This man says he's routinely stopped but not arrested. He supports the bill.
If I'm not a criminal, they shouldn't be keeping my personal information. If I haven't been charged, why keep my personal information?
It disallows the use of personal data from innocent people who have not done anything wrong. They may be suspicious. They may be thought to be future threats, but that is not a policy for a democracy. Maybe that might work in Bosnia. Maybe that might work in Somalia. Maybe it would have worked in the Soviet Union or in 1984. But we can't allow it to happen here.
According to the bill's sponsors, hundreds of thousands of people have been stopped over the years and had their information recorded. The vast majority have been non-white. The vast majority have been innocent. It does not end the controversial stop and frisk policy, although one of the sponsors does believe that it will sharply curtail how often stop and frisk is done on the streets of New York. To Mayor Bloomberg, this database was but a small price to pay for in an attempt to keep crime down within the city.
Michelle is not very happy about the fact that his name and the place where he attends school were revealed, and I think we won't invade his privacy any further.
Governor Patterson did not seem happy with the storm around his 15-year-old son, Alex.
I don't want to discuss my conversations with my son. He's a minor. He's underage.
The young Patterson was picked up yesterday by police after he was playing dice with older boys near his Upper West Side school. On Fox Business's I Miss show, the governor offered an explanation.
The principal said that the kids play this game all the time. This was not, no money transpired, no money was involved. It wasn't gambling.
And like I said, it appears that the governor's office is suggesting that now they're going to try and use rumor and innuendo to get him out.
Dick, there already have been published reports that Governor Patterson having some sort of relationship with a woman. The thing in Albany, the thing at the restaurant in New Jersey. Question to you is, isn't that survivable in this day and age? Maybe it's frowned upon, obviously, but it's not illegal. President Clinton was able to survive. We all know what happened there.
A New York judge grants class action status to a 2008 lawsuit accusing the police of discriminating against blacks and Hispanics. The judge ruled there was overwhelming evidence that a centralized stop and frisk program has led to thousands of unlawful stops.
The first ever court hearing on the controversial NYPD stop and frisk policy kicked off at federal court in Manhattan on Monday. Angel Ortiz of Soundview is just one of nearly 10 Bronx residents who are involved in the lawsuit. Ortiz says he was randomly frisked and arrested while he was visiting a friend in Queens back in March.
This past week, a federal judge cleared the way for a class action lawsuit to be filed against the city. It's a victory for critics who say the stop and frisk policy is racially biased. This year, police are on track to stop more than 700,000 people, and the majority of them are black or Hispanic. The mayor and the police commissioner defend the program, saying it's getting guns off the streets.
The judges on the bench and the people in Washington are certainly not among that group.
A big blow to the NYPD stop and frisk policy. One local DA is refusing to take many of the cases to trial.
The Bronx District Attorney says he will no longer prosecute many of the trespassing cases at housing developments that come to his office. It's the latest blow to an NYPD policy that critics claim unfairly targets minorities.
Before today, it has been mostly minority leaders critical of the stop and frisk policy. Now that criticism is coming from a prominent prosecutor. Lawyers say a program called Clean Halls is out of control here and across the city. Police patrol in these private buildings to make them safer.
There's nothing wrong at all with the police patrolling in the buildings or outside the buildings. What's troubling is that police officers have been under the mistaken impression that simply because buildings are enrolled in the program, they can stop anyone they like and demand identification.
The Civil Liberties Union is now suing police.
When you need them, they're not there. When you don't need them, they're right there. And they're doing things that they're not supposed to be doing.
The complaints are so bad, the Bronx DA recently wrote police, "We will no longer accept trespass cases based on police deposition paperwork." The letter goes on, each trespass arrest will require the arresting officer to be interviewed by an assistant DA.
So what this policy shift shows is that the Bronx DA's office is concerned about bad stops and arrests made without any justification at all.
If you want to bring crime back to New York, this is probably as good a way to start doing it.
In her decision, federal court judge Shira Scheindlin slams the city and NYPD for its cavalier attitude towards the prospect of widespread practice of suspicionless stops, adding that it displays a deeply troubling apathy towards New Yorkers' most fundamental constitutional rights.
How many times have you been stopped and frisked?
Over 15, 16, 17 times.
A federal judge ruling that one element of the NYPD's controversial stop and frisk policy is unconstitutional. The Eyewitness News investigators have repeatedly showed how the majority of stop and frisk targets are ethnic minorities. Our investigative reporter Jim Hoffer is here with today's ruling. Jim.
It's a major blow to the NYPD's widely used crime-fighting tactic known as stop and frisk. The federal judge's decision applies only to stops made outside private buildings in the Bronx that are part of the city's Clean Halls crime-fighting initiative. It is clear, though, that today's ruling will have far-reaching impact on a policy that stops more than 600,000 mostly innocent people every year.
It's the latest strongly worded ruling on stop and frisk by Southern District Court Judge Shira Scheindlin. In this decision, she states the plaintiffs have shown a clear likelihood of proving that the NYPD has displayed deliberate indifference toward a widespread practice of unconstitutional trespass stops outside private buildings in the Bronx. The judge is referring specifically to buildings enrolled in the NYPD's Clean Halls program. In her interim decision, she orders an end to cops stopping people outside when there's no reasonable suspicion of crime.
She found that there was absolutely no basis for the police officers involved to stop those people.
The New York Civil Liberties Union, which filed the suit on behalf of those living in Clean Halls buildings, hailed the decision.
If a police officer stops a person simply because he or she has walked out of a building enrolled in Operation Clean Halls, it is unjustified and violates the Constitution.
I didn't do nothing wrong!
The NYPD credits stop and frisk with making New York the safest big city in the nation. It has also put its officers through refresher training on when and how to conduct the crime-fighting tactic. But plaintiffs in the lawsuit who live in Clean Halls buildings say police are treating them like criminals.
My sister won't come anymore because she's afraid of being harassed and being arrested just for coming to visit.
You get to the point that you don't feel like a human being.
In the last hour, Commissioner Kelly responded to the ruling, saying, quote, today's decision interferes with the department's efforts to use all of the crime-fighting tools necessary to keep Clean Halls buildings safe and secure. We should note here, too, that this case is one of 3 lawsuits challenging the department's stop and frisk practices.
The mayor's still fuming at judges who aren't supporting stop and frisk and lawmakers who won't back gun control.
Joe and Sandra, we've spent weeks talking to this sergeant and examining hours of audio tape and numerous crime reports he gave to us. Proof, he says, that the Rockaway precinct, where he was a supervisor, has been downgrading felonies to make crime look low and top brass look good.
Sergeant Robert Borelli says the NYPD has left him with no choice but to go public after months of ignoring his allegations of routine misclassification of crimes at the 100th precinct in Queens. He says the pressure there to manipulate crime reports has become unbearable.
I just couldn't take it anymore. Came a point that it just finally broke, and I'm like, this has got to come to a stop.
So last May, Sergeant Borelli started handing over dozens of crime reports to the NYPD's Quality Assurance Division, whose job it is to ensure the accuracy of crime stats. The reports, he claims, amounted to smoking gun evidence of intentional, routine downgrading of crimes.
They're constantly changing the classification to downgrade crime so it's not tracked. It goes under the radar according to the FBI crime stats.
So in other words, trying to bury the serious crimes.
That's correct.
For example, this incident from last August in which an angry customer fired 4 shots at a cab driver, a clear case of felony assault.
I was the supervisor on the scene. I made the determination of what we had. I appropriately charged the proper crime, the attempted assault 1, and it was later on changed, I believe, the following morning. Someone lined it out and changed it to reckless endangerment.
Sergeant Borelli is no longer able to feed misclassified reports to Quality Assurance. Suddenly, and without explanation, he was recently transferred out of the precinct where he had been a supervisor for nearly a decade to the midnight shift at the Bronx courthouse.
The department needed to isolate me. They needed to contain me, so they transferred me out to remove me from having access to the complaint reports that I was giving to Quality Assurance on a pretty much week-to-week basis.
Sergeant Borelli has also been hit with discipline charges for an argument with an officer.
If you cook the books, it isn't going to stay private for very long. Somebody's going to find out about it, and then you're going to, the management, Kelly on down, is going to come down on you like a brick.
But all they seem to be coming down on are those in the department who speak out about the focus on numbers. Officer Adil Palanka of the 42nd Precinct, who spoke out against quotas last March in an Eyewitness News investigation, has been suspended. So too, Officer Schoolcraft of the 81st Precinct. Now, add to that another officer from another precinct, this one in the Bronx, who insist the books are being cooked.
People come in and they report a crime. You hand in the report, then they'll come back and look and try to get a complaint number, and you can't find it.
The report's gone.
The reports, yeah, they're gone. It's like it never happened.
Have you seen that occur?
Yeah. Yes, I have. I've seen it occur for a burglary, where the report just disappears.
How often does this happen?
This is a pretty frequent thing. There's a magical decrease in crime consistently.
Just days ago, this officer agreed to talk anonymously to Eyewitness News about what it says is the daily downgrading of crimes, even at times outright disappearance of crime reports.
Property reports, criminal complaints, and even something that looked like a domestic violence file left out in the open. The proper way to discard these police files is to shred them. Meanwhile, after learning what News 12 found, officers quickly took all the sensitive information and files from the dumpster and secured them inside the building. Even though the paperwork and the police files were taken into the 4-0, many here in the community believe the damage has already been done. They did clean it up, though.
Because you're here. That's like saying I robbed a store and I'm going to pay for something now that I got caught with the goods in my hand.
And we reached out to the NYPD. Officials say they are looking into how the confidential paperwork ended up in the dumpster.
Growing questions tonight about the reliability of the NYPD's own crime statistics. Our investigation more than a year ago raised questions about its accuracy, and Commissioner Ray Kelly appointed a special commission to investigate. Well, tonight a member of the City Council wants to know why that commission's investigation still has not been completed. Investigative reporter Jim Hoffer is here now with his exclusive story. Jim.
Liz, the report should have been wrapped up by last summer at the latest. The police commissioner who handpicked the independent review panel now says he has no idea when their examination of the crime data will be completed. In January of last year, Commissioner Kelly announced he had appointed 3 prominent former federal prosecutors to investigate the integrity of the NYPD crime data. The review coming after a series of reports on Channel 7 in which several officers came forward claiming precincts where they worked were fudging the books, even tossing out crime reports. This was obviously done for what?
Bringing crime down, or making, more specifically, the commanding officer of the 81st Precinct appear to be effectively fighting crime.
By just making reports disappear?
Correct.
When Kelly announced the new committee, the department's press release stated the committee would complete its work over the next 3 to 6 months. More than 13 months later, and still no report.
Why is it taking so long?
I can't tell you exactly because that's an independent committee. I will tell you that one of the participants passed away, unfortunately, and understandably may have slowed down the process.
But Commissioner, he passed away just a few months ago in December, long after, a press release put out by the department said that the work would have been done no later than this past summer.
I can't control the pace of the work of an independent committee.
John Jewett says he was victimized twice. First by a young man he met at a bar, and then by the Midtown North Precinct. It all began last March when the man he met allegedly attacked him with a wood table and threatened to kill him. Police responded and Jewett was rushed by ambulance to the hospital. He had a fractured rib, numerous cuts and bruises, and broken teeth.
The police didn't want you to file the crime complaint.
They did not want me to. And they did everything in their power not to.
Jewett says when he went to the precinct to get the assault report, he was told there was no record of any incident. For weeks he pleaded with the precinct to file it as a crime and charge the man who attacked him.
What do you make of that?
They didn't want to report it. They didn't want a statistic.
Do you think that the police just wanted this crime to go away?
Oh, they wanted to, absolutely. Me and the crime, gone.
Llewellyn Davis says the NYPD apparently wanted her to go away too. The 75-year-old keeps busy by looking for discarded items left on the curb, which she then sells on eBay. But during her hunt for valuables a few months ago, a young woman assaulted her.
She grabbed my wrist and she didn't make me fall, she slammed me against the concrete sidewalk.
She was treated for head injuries and a concussion by her doctor. She says for days following, she made repeated attempts to get a detective at the 108th precinct to take her assault seriously.
He did not call me back despite my repeated calls and my repeated messages.
The reason police officers make stops in Brownsville and East New York is not because of race, it is because of crime.
But for the second straight week, Mayor Bloomberg told churchgoers in Brownsville, Brooklyn, that the program keeps guns off the streets and keeps New Yorkers safe.
Through these stops, the police have recovered thousands of guns over the past decade and tens and thousands of other weapons. And no doubt that has saved lives. Now, I understand why some people want us to stop making stops. Innocent people who are stopped can be treated disrespectfully. That is just not acceptable. Commissioner Kelly won't tolerate it, and neither will I.
Series of gunshots rang out in a Brooklyn playground when police say a teen on a bicycle opened fire at a group of young people. Police say 2 16-year-old boys were shot in the arm, an 18-year-old man and 13-year-old girl were grazed in the back. People in the neighborhood are outraged by the violence.
It went in one side and came out the other side.
The bullet hit Ariana's left leg, and yet she's in good spirits.
How do you feel?
Her mother says she'll make a full recovery.
There it is. There it is.
This is 3-year-old Isaiah Rivera showing me his 2 bullet wounds on his right leg and his $1 million smile. He just got home from the hospital tonight and is lucky to be alive.
Police say the infant was grazed in the shoulder by a bullet as his mother pushed him in a stroller on Seneca Avenue. The mother saw him bleeding and ran to a nearby firehouse. The baby was then rushed to Lincoln Hospital, where he was treated and released. So far, there have been no arrests.
Police confirmed 6 people were shot, including a 13-year-old boy, along with 2-year-old Ariana and her dad, Michael.
Just 14 years old, Kamar Brooks has become the city's latest victim of senseless violence, shot and killed in Hafen Park, where he loved to play.
He didn't give any trouble. He kept to himself, and why him?
Kamar Brooks's life held great promise. Medals for track and field, bowling trophies. School brought him honor roll certificates, and tennis, a game he loved so much,
he showed off his rackets on Facebook.
Excelled very bright in school, honor student. Love the sports too much.
But after leaving a tennis match Thursday night, he was cut down by a single bullet.
He was doing what he normally does. He wasn't doing anything.
When he didn't come home by midnight Thursday, his father first walked around the park, didn't find him. 5:30 Friday morning, he went back and made the shocking discovery: Kamar's lifeless body near the tennis court.
And he was like, you know, I just found Kamar, he's dead in the park. And I'm like, what?
Crime Stoppers will pay up to $2,000 in cash.
As police now hunt for a suspect, park advocates worry
illegal guns that should not be in the hands of these people. That mixed with a lack of security in our parks is a deadly combination.
This time, taking a gifted life with so much promise.
He wanted to be a tennis star. He could have been that and more.
I also want to say something to those who brought their children out here today. Like you, we all want to make sure that they grow up safe and sound. And that's why we're working hard to make sure that they have good schools, safe streets, and bright futures. And that's what this Night Against Crime is all about.
Violence. 8 people in the Bronx and Harlem are shot within hours of the 29th annual National Night Out. Eyewitness News reporter Marcy Gonzalez live in Harlem with that story. Marcy.
Good morning, Ken. These National Night Out events were held across the country, people coming out to the streets to speak out against violence. And Mayor Bloomberg actually spoke at one of those events about 8 blocks from here, where 3 people were shot just hours later. Police say that 2 women were shot in the buttocks and a man was shot in the arm around 2 o'clock this morning here on the sidewalk outside of the Drew Hamilton houses. 2 people are now in custody being questioned in that shooting. And in another triple shooting around 11 last night, 3 teenagers were shot in a Bronx playground. The 2 young men were shot in the torso and a young woman was struck in the leg. This happened at the Agnes Hayward playground in the Williamsbridge section. And in that same 3-hour period of these shootings, a man was shot in East New York, Brooklyn, and another man was shot here in Harlem.
This is just coincidence that Mayor Bloomberg was scheduled to speak this morning in Brownsville, which is just about 3 miles away from all of the overnight shootings. Now, that night of gun violence would likely reinforce the need for stop and frisk, according to some city officials. This morning, Mayor Bloomberg stopped short of using the phrase stop and frisk, but he did pledge to continue to use all of the city's resources to stop violence. Now, Mayor Bloomberg spoke for about 15 minutes this morning at Christian Cultural Center in Brownsville, Brooklyn. He just wrapped up his remarks. This is his second Sunday morning that he has spent trying to get more community support for his crime-fighting tactics. Now, this morning, or overnight, 6 people were shot. 1 was killed in 4 shootings. The first shooting was at Sackman Street after 10:40 p.m. The NYPD says a 25-year-old male was shot multiple times. Sources say 23 times. That man died. Then just after midnight, a male and female were shot in the leg on Riverdale Avenue. Around 1 a.m., shots were fired on Stone Avenue and Truxton Street. No one was injured in that shooting. But then just after 3 a.m., 3 people were shot on Thetford Avenue. A man was shot in the leg, another male was shot in the forearm, and a woman was shot in the abdomen. A night of gun violence again that will likely lead to more stop and frisk.
Legal guns use has become a major problem citywide. In an effort to tackle the problem, Mayor Bloomberg met with community leaders and clergy members Friday at Gracie Mansion. 4 representatives from the Bronx attended the meeting. The leaders are outraged about Monday's shootings and about the recent increase in violence citywide. They insist that something needs to be done.
He's also called for closing background check loopholes and lobbied for a federal ban on assault weapons, like the AR-15 semi-automatic rifle used in Colorado.
People say it's bad politics to address the issue. I think they're wrong. I'm going to try to stir it up.
Inside the apartment, police recovered a cache of weapons that speaks volumes about illegal guns.
The commissioner said the suspect's gun was purchased with several others in Wilmington, North Carolina. And the mayor says the problem is obvious.
This is plain and simple the federal government's problem, and they can fix it, and only they can fix it.
For the last few weeks, but police trying to ease those fears
Well, they broke up a gun trafficking ring. Undercover officers confiscated a total of 56 guns from 2 men who were running a Florida to New York gun trafficking ring.
Illegal gun trafficking. A bill is being introduced in Congress that would make it a crime to traffic in guns like these, and it would also go after so-called middlemen. They buy guns for someone else so that person can evade any kind of background check.
A source tipped off police about the delivery of weapons coming in from South Carolina.
Also red hot over the continuing lack of federal action to stop illegal gun sales on the internet.
And he says the time for stricter gun control laws is long overdue.
The disgrace is the federal government has left some loopholes where it's hard to enforce their own laws, and they don't fund any of the enforcement. But if you have some of these pro-gun organizations like the NRA repeatedly says, let's enforce the laws.
I can't lift my arm too high. Like, as you can see, I move it too far, it starts to hurt. Can't touch, like, if something's scratching me, I can't scratch it. I can't hardly take a shower properly. It's not cool. It's not a cool experience.
Jamela Thomas cradles her 15-year-old son in her arms, her hand gently touching the spot where a bullet lodged in his chest. Her boy was one of 4 wounded while playing basketball at Fish Playground Monday night.
The teenager just hanging out with her friends in the Morrisania section, suddenly the target of gunfire. She says the violence has to stop.
Just 14 years old and already a target of gun violence.
And he started shooting, but like me and my friend was in shock. And I felt something, but like I didn't fall right away.
She speaks exclusively to Eyewitness News, telling me that she and a group of her friends stood here on Lyman Place near Freeman Street Sunday night 2 weeks ago.
What do you remember about the shooting? Did it happen very fast?
They just put the gun out the window. They rolled the window down a little bit. They didn't even look at who they were shooting at.
It came from a car driving by, nothing said, just 6 rapid shots.
Did you even realize what happened?
When I looked down and I saw blood, that's when I fell.
Her 15-year-old friend also shot.
Tell me about your injuries. Where were you shot?
I got shot in the ankle and it came out, and I got shot in the calf and it came out, but the bullet went through, so it broke the bone right here. I wonder how they get the guns. Who gave them the guns?
A New York cop accused of stealing guns from fellow officers, and wait till you hear why he allegedly did it. Good evening, everyone. I'm Bill Ritter. Liz is off tonight. The officer and several civilians now charged with illegally selling those stolen guns on the streets. Prosecutors say the officer, who swore to protect the public, instead could have put the public in danger. Eyewitness News investigative reporter Sarah Wallace at the courthouse in Lower Manhattan with our lead story. Sarah?
And Bill, there is no greater betrayal for a cop than this. Prosecutors say that 31-year-old Nicholas Mina didn't care where the guns ended up. He was so blinded by drugs and debt. They say he confessed to it all last night, basically admitting that he was hooked on prescription drugs and sold out his shield for a fix. Prosecutors say 9th Precinct cop Nicholas Mina was so desperate to support his drug habit, he was willing to sell guns on the street, and not just any guns, but guns from his own colleagues. Investigators claim Mina has confessed to stealing 4 9mm from lockers in the 9th Precinct and selling them, along with one of his Glocks, to his drug dealer to pay off a debt. Now, this was an investigation that involved wiretaps, physical surveillance, and search warrants. Prosecutors say that yesterday they raided Chavez's home and they discovered a treasure trove of prescription pills, 4 additional guns, a bullet-resistant vest from the 9th Precinct, and equipment used to deface guns.
All of these shootings have a disgraceful fact in common. All were committed with illegal guns that came from out of state.
Mayor Bloomberg's outspoken in his attacks on the gun industry. So it's hard to believe, but police sold 28,000 pounds of spent shell casings not to a scrap metal company, but to an ammunition store called Georgia Arms. The company reloads casings with bullets and legally sells them online.
I'm sure they are saying, mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa. What an embarrassment. It's totally inconsistent with our message, and we've got to correct this.
Councilmember Letitia James is now demanding a change in the law to prohibit spent casings being sold to an ammo company. City Hall sources say they didn't know the police department was doing this. Still, they call it perfectly legal. The city made about $70,000 on the deal.
That's a frightening thought.
State Senator Eric Adams, a former police officer, said he was stunned by today's news in the New York Times, especially with so many violent and tragic shootings in the city this summer. Today he asked, what's the mayor thinking?
Would he like to find out one day the spent shell from NYPD took the life of a 2-year-old or 4-year-old?
Well, police tonight are searching for the people involved in a shootout in a playground in the Bronx that claimed the life of a 4-year-old little boy. Lloyd Morgan was caught in the crossfire last night when bullets started flying during a basketball tournament. His tragic death comes at a time of heated debate over the NYPD stop-and-frisk policy. At least one critic now says the child's death may have changed his mind. Political reporter Dave Evans is at the scene in the Morrisania section tonight. David.
Liz, as you know, under the current policy, about 700,000 New Yorkers stopped and questioned by police last year. The vast majority of them, of course, young black and Hispanic men. So it was big news last night when a critic of the mayor's policy, who also is African American, all of a sudden supported the mayor. But today, things seem to change a bit.
You've destroyed me. You changed my whole life in an instant.
In the raw emotion and anger of a 4-year-old killed in the crossfire, a debate began all over again on stop and frisk.
Look what happened here tonight. Maybe we should reconsider and be supporting stop and frisk.
The assemblyman who represents this part of the Bronx was so angry about the boy's death that he gave aid and comfort to the Bloomberg administration.
So maybe the commissioner and the mayor was right. You know, maybe we should revisit this stop and frisk.
Councilman Jabani Williams today said last night's tragedy does not change a thing on stop and frisk, a policy that he says just doesn't work.
We all need to empathize with what's going on, but that emotional, gut-wrenching response, we got to take away from that at some point and say, is this working? I've asked the mayor, the commissioner, the deputy mayors, everyone to answer the million-dollar question of why shootings are going up at the same time stop, question, and frisk is going up.
You know that his only Tennessee was spread, and he was on his way home.
And it's tragic that it had to end like that, that I couldn't bring him back home.
It's disgusting and it's scary. It's very, very scary because it's happening for no reason.
The mayor visited the young patient tonight.
We have to obey the Constitution. We have to obey everybody's rights. But if you don't have the right to go out on the street without worrying about yourself being shot, a lot of the other stuff is kind of not really that important. But if you don't have the right to go out on the street without worrying about yourself being shot, a lot of the other stuff is kind of not really that important. Not really that important. Not really that important. Not really that important.
This year than last year here in the Bronx. The number of homicides dropped nearly 25% this year compared to last. Cops say there have been 111 murders so far this year. The NYPD points in part to the controversial stop and frisk policy for the decrease in murders here in the Bronx and citywide.
any information. Guns, cars, all held as evidence, were destroyed by Sandy's rising waters. The evidence housed in 2 large NYPD warehouses and unprotected against the surge. Eyewitness News investigative reporter Jim Hoffer is here with more on what it all means. Jim?
It could mean criminal cases tossed out, and some say even wrongful convictions. The NYPD isn't saying much about the extent of the damage to evidence, but when you see the location of one of these warehouses, you'll wonder, what were they thinking? Surrounded by water, this NYPD evidence warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn had no chance of escaping the superstorm. What little preparation was taken to protect the facility proved no match for Sandy's surge.
Don't be stupid. So don't be stupid. Get out and go to higher, safer ground. You know, I just don't know any other way to put it.
Same for this evidence warehouse in Greenpoint. Reportedly, thousands of barrels of stored DNA evidence, as well as guns and drugs at both facilities, came in contact with sewage-contaminated floodwaters.
From a societal standpoint, this is highly problematic.
Former Brooklyn prosecutor David Schwartz says the impact could be tremendous.
You will have a significant number of cases where that evidence will have an effect on the trial.
Already, it's reported the courts are feeling the impact, with police testifying that evidence in some cases was inaccessible. Some attorneys for the poor fear the damage will result in wrongful convictions.
New Yorkers are often accused of crimes wrongfully, and they're entitled to have an opportunity to prove their defense. And if the evidence has been lost, they can't.
The Brooklyn's district attorney's office would not say whether the NYPD has briefed them on the damage, but in a statement to Eyewitness News, a spokesman said, "We will continue to notify attorneys as soon as we learn that vouchered evidence has been stored in one of the 2 damaged facilities, and will continue to examine the issue on a case-by-case basis." Meanwhile, the impact of the damaged evidence could be felt in the courts for years.
There could be motions being brought after conviction later on that says that lost evidence would have exonerated the criminal defendant, and therefore the entire case should be dismissed. So you'll be seeing these motions for years to come.
Just minutes ago, the NYPD confirmed that there has been 6 instances so far where the court was told that evidence for a pending case existed but was unavailable because of the 2 sites closed because of contamination. Deputy Commissioner Paul Brown telling us in a statement that a lot of the evidence has already been tested for DNA, and those samples are preserved by the medical examiner. However, Brown states, quote, "It is unknown how much evidence will end up being lost entirely, but it is expected," he says, "to be considerable."
Weapons that were designed for soldiers in war theaters don't belong on our streets. And so what I'm trying to do is to get a broader conversation about how do we reduce the violence generally. Part of it is seeing if we can get an assault weapons ban reintroduced.